Thank you, John, for the very kind introduction, and to the Association of Certified Financial Crime Specialists for hosting this very important conference. I wish I could be there with you all today as you work on the important issue of counter-terrorist financing. I also want to thank each of you in the audience for the role that you play in helping keep our nation safe. As a member of Congress, my first constitutional duty is to provide for the safety of America, and I am wholly committed to that duty. In my first term in Congress, I was asked by the majority leader to succeed him as chairman of the Congressional Task Force on Terrorism and Unconventional Warfare. Since then, I have met with some 200 heads of state, members of parliament, agency officials, intel experts, and terrorist financing experts. The threats around the world are growing, whether it's ISIS, Iranian-backed terrorists in the Middle East, threats from China and North Korea in Asia, Russian aggression, or Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram in Africa, not to mention the drug lords right here in the Americas. Everyone seems to understand the growing threats. What many of our friends and allies haven't understood is America's misguided foreign policy. America needs to be the leader. The world has known peace when America has shown strength and resolve. This doesn't mean we need to constantly provide military action around the world, though we should never take military action off the table and forecast to our enemies what actions we won't take. In fact, I think the most effective action we can take is exactly what so many of you here for this conference are doing every day, and that is undermining the funding sources for those who wish to harm America and our way of life. Any organization, state, government, or business, whether terrorist-oriented or not, cannot succeed without the proper funding. And if we can intercept the funding of these terrorist groups, we can deteriorate their capabilities and ultimately defeat them. This is exactly why the House Financial Services Committee has recently created the Bipartisan Task Force to investigate terrorism financing, for which I serve as the vice chair. So many of you are already doing fantastic work to ensure that we are cutting off terrorist funding. But with so many threats and with so many government agencies and so many from the private sector involved, we need to take a close look at what we're doing. We need to ensure that we keep doing what is effective, improve what we can do better, and take a hard look at fixing the things that are broken. Think about this for a moment. Iran, the terrorist sponsor state, whose economy we have sustained with $12 billion of repatriated oil revenue, is going to see an influx of hundreds of billions of dollars more, assuming the Iranian agreement is completed. Iran, who has been a state sponsor of terrorism for some 30 years, funds terror groups ranging from Hamas and Hezbollah to the Houthis in Yemen and groups we don't even know the names of yet. Just recently, they deployed 2 warships into the Gulf of Aden off the coast of Yemen. As their resources grow, they will have more money to fund their proxy wars around the globe. At the same time, we're facing the threat of ISIS, who by almost all accounts is the most well-funded terrorist organization in history, and who is responsible for the deaths of thousands of Iraqi and Syrian citizens. They've also stated a goal of planting their flag at the White House. Now is the time for great vigilance on the part of our counter-terrorist financing system, and our success in intercepting these funds will save countless lives. As a member of the Financial Services Committee, a representative from Charlotte, the second largest banking center in America, and a former board member of a community bank, I also understand that counter-terrorist financing efforts impose a significant but vital and necessary burden on our financial systems. It can be easy for people to lose sight of the fact that our best tools to uncover money being funneled to terrorists in the Middle East or from terrorists abroad to homegrown terrorists in our backyards is by using the same mechanism we use to look for the proceeds of organized crime, anti-money laundering laws. These programs are working, and we must continue to hold firm against efforts to disassemble and dismantle them under the guise of being a compliance burden. Instead, we should recognize the necessary burden of anti-money laundering compliance and account for it in other ways. Congress has traditionally worked to remove unnecessary regulations to ease the burden on the financial industry and allow them to focus on the vital work related to our national security. Unfortunately, that compact was broken with the passage of the Dodd-Frank Act, which created a blizzard of new regulations and compliance burdens, almost none of which are good for consumers and which are drying up access to the credit markets necessary to create jobs. I assure you, the House Financial Services Committee is hard at work to remove the unnecessary burdens and regulations of Dodd-Frank and restore the traditional compliance balance. Our continued focus on ISIS will remain important, but just as important is to not put on blinders and miss money flowing to terrorist or small cells in the U.S. and across Europe. It is not expensive to create the devastation we saw on September the 11th or the Charlie Hebdo attacks. We need to ensure we are staying alert and proactive. We must also remember that terrorist organizations still use an array of activities to fund themselves. Even ISIS isn't solely reliant on illicit oil sales. And the harder we tighten the screws in one area, terrorists will seek out another venue to sustain their flow of money. For example, one Iraqi intelligence official has claimed that ISIS earned over $34 million in early 2014 alone by selling 800 items stolen from the ancient city of Al-Nabak near Damascus. High financiers and nonprofit front groups continue to be a problem. As well, like Tariq bin al-Harzi, who was also named in September by the U.S. Treasury as an ISIS fundraiser, who gathered around $2 million from Qatari funders that was sent straight to ISIS. We must also stay alert for more routine crimes, including drug smuggling and extortion. We know that Taliban is a source of heroin from Afghanistan, and Iranian-backed groups in South America are funneling cocaine and marijuana money back to the Middle East. Whether it's through international organizations like the UN or FATF, or through bilateral partnerships, we must demand that the countries America so often supports are proactively joining us in this effort. It's not enough to just denounce terrorism if high-dollar donors are not being pursued or hawalas connected to terrorists are not being investigated. Next month, I'll be traveling to Turkey. Turkey is a longtime NATO member and has a growing influence with the region. However, the continued reports and allegations of Turkey turning a blind eye to money smuggling and sanction-busting regimes are troubling. FATF has placed Turkey on the gray list for years. We shouldn't just accept this as the norm. Instead, we need to work with Turkey to fill in those current gaps. But this isn't just about Turkey. We have several other allies in the region and around the world who face the same allegations, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Pakistan. Just a few weeks ago, I was in Berlin, meeting with the German Minister of the Interior and members of the Bundestag. We discussed terrorist financing and the outcome we can achieve through better and stronger collaboration. As a member of Congress, I will continue to build strong relationships with my counterparts around the world and raise the issue of counterterrorist financing. I'll also be traveling to Vienna for a forum on security and will address some 100 members of Parliament from over 20 countries from around Europe, urging them to fully commit themselves to these efforts. But it also isn't just about our allies. As I said previously, we need to improve operations within our own system. As we've cut off terrorist access to the international financial system, we've begun to see a rise in the trade-based money laundering. Because of the work of many of you, we have the tools and the information we need to have a meaningful impact. But like every bureaucracy, fiefdoms form layer upon layer of red tape, and levels of management build over time, becoming obstacles instead of facilitators. That's why last month I questioned Secretary Lew about why there isn't a stronger coordination between the Treasury Department and the Department of Homeland Security, particularly Border Control. Our government has vast resources and capabilities. We need them to all function flawlessly to achieve our goals. And to do so, we need every government agency to fully cooperate. Another issue that we need to resolve is the partnership between the private sector and the government. This week, Congress will be taking critical action to increase the public-private partnership with regards to cybersecurity. We need to advance similar legislation to strengthen partnerships in our counterterrorist financing efforts. We should be encouraging our financial institutions who are on the forefront of terrorist financing to work with the government, and the government should lead by example in working with the private sector. Stopping the flow of money requires teamwork and coordination, and it's a two-way street. We also need to remove the barriers preventing financial institutions from sharing certain information with each other. Common sense says we need everyone working together, and removing these impediments is the common sense solution. As Vice Chairman of the Bipartisan Task Force to Investigate Terrorism Financing, these will be my main priorities to make sure we are eliminating barriers, not creating them, and allowing for the full potential of our existing capabilities. That's why as soon as next week, I'll be introducing legislation to allow for more cooperation between financial institutions to coordinate on issues of terrorist financing and major crimes. This is common sense, and will follow this week's action in the House to improve our efforts to fight cybercrime. I expect strong bipartisan and bicameral support for my legislation. In closing, I want to again thank each of you for the work that you do day in and day out to protect us. Over the years, we have had great success, and we are saving lives. I hope each of you will reach out to me if there's anything that we can do to assist your efforts. Thank you so very much. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.